Hello and welcome to the 8-man hard mode Operations Chief Boss Fight Guide. My name's Hayete, and today I'll be covering everything you need to know to successfully complete the 4th fight in the Scum and Villainy operation. For this encounter, we suggest you bring a standard composition of 2 tanks, 4 DPS, and 2 healers. Any class composition will be more than capable of beating this fight. So very quickly, I want to cover with you the DPS requirements for the fight. This fight is a bit different from any other fight in the game in that the first part of the encounter involves your group sneaking past certain enemies and attacking others. For that part of the fight, I've decided to exclude a DPS analysis, since there are many variables that need to be considered to estimate a figure which would be unknown. So the following analysis represents the second half of the encounter, which is a bit more traditional, and follows suit with what you're probably used to. As you can see, the DPS required here is very low. This analysis does not take into account healer or tank DPS, which would push this figure even lower. Alright, so before we move into strategy explanation, let's take a few minutes to go over the mechanics for this fight, so you'll have a good idea of what things look like and what they do. Then we'll discuss how to put it all together. I'll be covering this a bit different than you may be used to if you've followed my other video guides. Since this fight has 2 very different and distinct parts, I'm going to cover the second half's mechanics here, and the first part will be covered during strategy explanation. Number 1. Flashbang. This is a 3-second stun used on the boss's current target. The stun effect additionally stuns any player within 4 meters of the boss, 360 degrees from his center. Number 2. Knockback. This is a 10-meter knockback by the boss that affects any player within 4 meters, and covers 360 degrees from his center. Number 3. Terminate. This is a 3-second channel that at its conclusion hits the boss's current target for a high amount of damage. Number 4. Mass Explosive Probe. This ability is a 2-second channel by the boss. At its completion, all raid members will gain a 25-second debuff called Explosive Probe. If any player affected by this debuff takes damage, or at the conclusion of the 25-second duration, the Explosive Probe will detonate, doing a sizable amount of damage. Number 5. Summon Rail Turrets. This is a 2-second channel by the boss. As it completes, 4 rail turret adds will spawn and start randomly attacking raid members. Okay, so let's move now into strategy explanation. The first part of this encounter requires you split your raid team into 4 groups of 2. Each group will be engaging 2 adds. These different add teams are denoted by color and from here on will be referred to as red, green, yellow, or blue team. There are considerations that should be made prior to deciding who will go where, so before I touch on that, let me explain the general idea behind this first phase. Phase 1 forces your entire raid to sneak through Oasis City undetected. As soon as you start the encounter, all members will gain the Oasis City infiltration debuff. This debuff has a 6-minute duration, and if allowed to expire, will mean your group instantly fails the encounter. In order to take on the operations chief, you first need to dispatch his backup teams spread throughout the city. The following image shows where these teams are located, so let's discuss the color teams in more detail. Red team consists of an assault gunner and flame tech. There are a few abilities you'll want to be watching for. Heat beam is the most dangerous attack done by red team, and is channeled by the flame tech. This ability is interruptible, and should be interrupted every time. The next attack to note is Grav Round, which is used by the assault gunner. On its own, this attack does little damage, but applies a debuff to the target hit. Over time, the stacks increase, making damage taken considerably more noticeable. This attack should be interrupted when possible. The last noticeable attack is Fire Device. The Flame Tech will call in a fire device to a location nearby. Any player standing in this will take damage over time. The best way to handle red team is to ensure one player focuses interrupting heat beam and the other player grav round. Green team consists of a pyro guard and duelist. Same as with red team, the Pyro Guard will channel Heat Beam as well. Ensure this is interrupted promptly. The Duelist will cast Unload during the fight. This ability does a high amount of damage and should be interrupted immediately. The last mechanic to note for green team is that the Pyro Guard will apply a burn debuff to its current target. This burn is cleansable. So to defeat green team, ensure one player interrupts Heat Beam and the other Unload. Yellow team consists of a Medtech and a Pyro Guard. This Pyro Guard is the exact same as green team's, and thus its Heat Beam should be interrupted and the burn debuff cleansed. Two mechanics to make note of here are Medscan and Call Infusion Droid. Medscan is a simple heal by the Medtech applied to the opponent with the least amount of health. This should be interrupted. Call Infusion Droid, if allowed to complete its channel, will spawn a healing droid that will aid the Medtech in healing both enemies. This should be interrupted. The best way to defeat yellow team is to ensure the Medtech is not allowed to finish any heals. Have one player interrupt Medscan and the other call Infusion Droid. Blue team consists of two Pack Hunters. These adds maintain a buff called Pack Hunter that increases all damage dealt if they are within 10 meters of each other. The only notable mechanic to mention here is Shockwave Strike. This is a channeled ability that at its conclusion knocks back any player within a 45-degree arc of the Pack Hunter, doing a large amount of damage. This ability is not interruptible. Alright, so now that you have some basic information on each of the four color teams, let me explain how to split your group and a few other details to know for Phase 1. There are of course many ways to split your group that work for this fight, so the following is just our suggestion and reasoning as to why we suggest this method. So with that said, our suggested strategy here is to send a tank and DPS to red, healer and DPS to green, healer and DPS to yellow, and tank and DPS to blue. Since red team only requires some interrupts and has low damage output, a tank and DPS pair will be more than capable of handling this. Green team's damage output is slightly higher than that of red, and for that reason, we send a healer DPS pair to take care of green. Additionally, the healer will be capable of cleansing the burn debuff. Yellow is where things get tricky. We suggest sending one of your best DPS to yellow, as you have to deal with more abilities than you can interrupt. All Medtech abilities should be interrupted and are of highest priority. However, the Pyro Guard will still be using Heat Beam, which does a large amount of damage. Both adds can be interrupted by knockbacks and hard CCs. So we send a hard-hitting DPS and healer, preferably a healer capable of knockbacks or hard CCs, to yellow. If at all possible, Sentinel, Guardian, Marauder, and Juggernaut DPS are the best to send to yellow due to the short cooldown associated with their interrupts. Blue team is fairly easy to deal with as long as the players engaging them are paying attention. Since the hardest hitting ability used by blue team can be completely avoided, we send a hard-hitting DPS and tank. The tank is there to hold threat and keep them facing in one direction. As the Pack Hunters start casting Shockwave Strike, simply have both team members move behind them and continue DPSing. Although they are buffed when they are within 10 meters of each other, we suggest ignoring this and keeping them together to more easily avoid this mechanic. The last thing I want to mention is the two buffs inherent to all color teams, Cautious and Mounting Caution. Cautious essentially limits the number of players you can have engaging a team. If more than 2 players attack the same color team, you will autofill and reinforcements will be called and you'll be one-shotted. Mounting Caution basically denotes the number of players currently being viewed by the teams as hostile. This should show with a number 2 on the debuff or a number 1. Once you defeat all color teams, the barrier blocking you from getting to the Operations Chief will be removed. The Operations Chief will need some slight pre-planning as well. The rail turrets that spawn throughout the encounter will always spawn in these 4 locations. We suggest simply assigning each of the 4 turret locations to your DPS players. Generally, we do melee DPS on the front 2 and ranged DPS on the back 2. For placement, have melee on the boss, ranged and heals in the back, and the tanks in front of the boss with their backs to the computer terminals. Shortly after you start the fight, the Ops Chief will flashbang the tank, and any other players within 4 meters. Afterwards, he'll channel Terminate, then do his knockback, channel and apply mass explosive probes, and finally summon rail turrets. These mechanics are cyclic and will repeat indefinitely until he is defeated. Any players that are capable of cleansing themselves of explosive probes should do so, and healers should be sure to cleanse the tanks or players with low health first. Rail turrets should be engaged immediately and defeated promptly. You'll rinse and repeat these mechanics until he's defeated. So let me give you a few tips now for this fight. First, during Phase 1, do your best not to pull any of the battle droids on patrol throughout the city. If you do, CC it and move on. You can kill them, but immediately after they are defeated, another will spawn to take its place. Second, all color teams are capable of being hard CC'd, or pushed to interrupt abilities. Third, the operations chief can be tanked in such a way as to completely stop his flashbang mechanic. This is a godsend for melee DPS players. To do this, you'll want to place your tanks here and have them taunt fluff back and forth whenever possible. Since your tanks will be out of range for the flashbang mechanic, it will not be cast. Lastly, this fight can be solo tanked if needed. If this is done, be sure to send the 5th DPS to red team during Phase 1. So that's the fight, guys. This fight is probably one of the top 5 easiest fights in the game, and should not give you any trouble if done correctly. The thing I see messed up on this fight the most is pulling battle droids during Phase 1. Make sure your group does not rush through recklessly pulling droids. So let us know if this guide helped your group or guild defeat this boss, and feel free to leave any comments, suggestions, tips, tricks, or anything I may have missed in the comment section below. Since you've made it this far, why not go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe? Subscribing will ensure you're the first to know of new guides and content as they're released. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, enjoy the fight.
Patrol teams, this is Ops. You've got your assignments? We're here to show the Hutts what we can do. So no room for screw-ups. Stick to your patrol zones, maintain contact, and keep your eyes open. Ops to all security teams, report in.
Gold team, all clear.
Green team, all clear.
operations center is under attack! Need reinforcements now! Cops to all teams! Where are you scumbags? I need backup! Now!